A very good morning to you all. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you with us today for the official launch of the Blue Education Framework. And on behalf of this organizing team here, our speakers and partners, we appreciate that you're taking the time to join us today. My name is Evita. I'm the Managing Director of European Marine Science Educators Association, and I had the pleasure of bringing partners together to develop a Blue Education Framework. And I will be your moderator of today's webinar. So for who is new to our webinars, this launch takes place in the context of our BlueLightS project. BlueLightS is a mission ocean project. We aim to support the integration of ocean and water literacy into formal education systems in Europe. And through BlueLightS, we are working with partners across the continent here in Europe to strengthen cooperation with schools, education authorities, researchers, and ocean professionals. So the framework we are launching today supports this effort. And we are creating a common reference point for what Blue education can look like in practice. And we will provide a structural way on how to advance it in the different countries. So this framework, it brings together core principles, enabling conditions for strengthening ocean and water literacy in schools, from curriculum, teacher training, resources, national strategies. It's all in the framework. So before we begin, let me briefly explain what you can expect today in the webinar. Over the next 90 minutes, we will introduce the framework to you, why it was developed, how it works, and how it can support more action across Blue education communities in Europe. And after that, we will move into a moderated panel discussion with our speakers here today and explore how this Blue education framework connects to all the wider education efforts and frameworks. And then this session will be closed with a Q&A where you can ask questions to all the speakers. Before we start, a few housekeeping rules. So this webinar is being recorded and we will send you, you can watch the recording after this session. All your cameras and microphones, they're muted. But we do invite you to share questions at any time using the Q&A function below in the menu. And we will monitor your questions throughout the session and answer them as well via text or in the Q&A session. If you experience any technical issues, you can always write something in the chat. Or if you have a remark, anything, you can also share with us in the chat. So before we go to our speakers, we have a lot of people here in the room, so let's get a quick sense of who is here. And for that, of course, I will ask you to take a moment and reply to our Slido question. So we can see, I will share the Slido here on the screen. Let's see where you are from. So please scan the QR code or join us via the URL and the number here and let us know where you are from. I will give you a few minutes. So I think we are with 140 already in the room today. And still people are joining. It seems you have a lot of people from Croatia today with us. So, I have another question for you. You can keep on filling it in. We would like to know who you are, but please only use one word. Feel free. What suits you for today? Still have countries coming. Some interesting answers as well. So in our audience, we do expect quite a lot of teachers and researchers. Yeah, thank you all for participating in this poll. We have an idea of who is in the room. There's many more people in the room. I see most of the people did not reply, but let us continue anyway. So I will go again to my screen and voilà. So I'm delighted to introduce to you the first speakers of today who will launch European Blue Education Framework. Two ladies from European Schoolnet, Miss Ivana Kovac, Evita Tasiopoulou. Thank you, Ivana, Evita, for walking us through the framework today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you all for being here in such a number today. And I see we have very interesting audience. So I saw a lot of teachers, a lot of researchers, a lot of nature lovers, a lot of very interesting audience. And I hope you will find this session today very useful for your work. My name is Ivana Kovac. I come from European Schoolnet, which is a network of ministries of education in Europe. And just in brief, our vision is to transform education in Europe. But today I'm here as one of the project partners of BlueLightS Horizon project that Evie described before. And we all have the same efforts and the same vision, which is to we aim to strengthen the knowledge and skills for children and youth and make sure that they have skills and resilience to deliver blue sustainability and participate in blue education projects. I am having some issues changing my slides. I don't know, Evie, if you can maybe change it for me or Michaela, but just to let you know what we will discuss briefly today. We will just briefly go through what is it, a framework. So we are going to discuss the European Blue Education Framework and other activities that will help us collaborate better and proceed better. And we will present you just in brief to give you just a glance of the Blue Education Framework, the team who worked on this framework, core principles and purposes, and also we will reflect a little bit on the structure of the framework. Evie or Michaela, I hope that, because for me, I don't see any changes in slides, but let me know if it's fine for you. If not, I will just...
I can present your presentation and
If you can, that would be great.
take care of the slides if you like.
Okay, because I do not see that they are changing. So if you can just upload it and I will stop sharing. So before we dive into this discussion today, in many reports, I'm sure that you have read these days, we see references to well-established frameworks. If we can go just to the slide 3, please. So before diving into this topic, let's, the next slide, please. Correct, yes, thank you. So before we dive into this topic, just let's take a moment to reflect on what is a framework, why do we need it, and how can it help us guide our work. So in the context of European Union, we can say that framework is actually a set of standards, a set of ideas and guidelines that are designed to help us support practices, to support policies or methodologies. Frameworks can include key principles. They can also include KPIs, so some key performance indicators that will help us guide our actions. And as well as that, they can also include monitoring tools to help us track our progress over this time. So in brief, framework is something that turns vision into action. It helps us implement, plan, evaluate our activities, and among all, it helps us ensure some consistency throughout this process. And when designing this Blue Education framework, we took inspiration from a couple of well-known frameworks that you can see here on this slide, such as Digital Competence Framework, Green Comp, and also STEAMIT framework. But now we will go to the next slide, where we will just dive slowly into Blue Education framework. And I would like also to present you before that the team and organizations that contributed to this work. As you may know, BlueLightS project is bringing together 16 partners. So we have a very big consortium that comes from across Europe, and we cover a wide range of Blue Education projects. Our partners come from different types of organizations. As you can see here on the left side, all of our logos, and there is also our photo on the right side. And we come from universities, environmental centers, enterprises that are specialized in maritime and youth sectors, also NGOs that focus on education, and so on. And also in this process of creating this framework, we had a very strong support from our advisory board, who led us with their expertise and provided input throughout this process. So apart from these logos that you can see on the left side, we also have to thank all the individuals and all the organizations who participated in our work. So all those of you, and I hope that we have some of you here today, who participated in surveys, in focus groups, and all activities that were organized throughout the process on the Blue Education platform. And this was indeed one very, very large effort, and it was a joint effort, which is even more important. And we are very grateful to everyone who contributed to this process. On the next slide, we will slowly dive into this specific framework, so the Blue Education framework. And I will try to give you just the brief overview today. So our main objective was to demonstrate the added value of Blue Education and to try to identify the conditions that are needed to strengthen it across different European education contexts. Here we try to identify the key drivers of change and also to provide practical examples of actions that can be taken at individual level, at school level, and also at national level. And this framework also outlines several key objectives that can serve as a baseline for any Blue Education initiative that one is organizing. So among them, we have sustainable education, which is there to empower learners to become agents of change, inclusivity, just to ensure that there are equal opportunities for all learners, well-being, where we think of promoting supportive and positive learning environments, and not the last but not the least here, the student engagement of students and parents, where we also recognize their active role in Blue Education. What is even more important is to know that these topics that we have just listed here, together with the actors of change and targets that need to be changed, should not be seen as something that stands isolated. So rather than that, the idea is that they should all be seen as building blocks, which together support the overall vision of Blue Education. On our next slide, you will see what are those two guiding questions that we mentioned before. So guiding questions that we try to respond to in this framework. Those are what needs to change and who needs to be mobilized. And in the framework, we dig a bit deeper into these topics. On the next slide, you will see the structure. So how does our table of contents look like? As we know, BlueLightS promotes a holistic approach to Blue Education, and it links the topics we mentioned before, so sustainability, inclusivity, well-being. And based on that, we included these chapters in the very introduction as some transversal objectives, and then they were followed by these two leading questions that you can see in blue. So what needs to change and who needs to be mobilized? When it comes to these areas that need to be changed throughout the process, the framework explores some of the key identified areas, such as national strategies, professional development, curricula, and resources, educational resources, and also financial and human resources. On the right side, you can see in brief visualization of the framework for all of those who maybe do not have time to focus and read the entire framework at one as a one chunk, but they want to see if there is something for them in the framework itself. So that's one pager that will help you understand the core structure. On the next slide, we will also see that apart from these main questions, the Blue Education Framework also provides practical tools and resources for its users. It includes examples, real-life examples from BlueLightS experimentation countries, which are also replicable and transferable to other locations, so also other different contexts and geographical locations. It also contains a collection of knowledge, which shares takeaways from key takeaways from events, from activities that are covered within the project. And this collection is currently gathering more than 10 key takeaways, but the idea is to continue with this and to enrich it as we evolve further, and to collect key takeaways from all events that are going to happen. And in addition, the framework also introduces something very interesting for the users, which is a self-assessment tool. The self-assessment tool is inspired by the SDG Impact self-assessment tool, and it helps the users identify strengths, gaps, and opportunities where they can evolve, they can collaborate and improve, supporting the development of more ocean literate and inclusive systems. And this tool is something that we are still working on, in a sense that we also want to improve it, which is also something that we have an idea to elaborate on and enrich throughout the future events, where we collect more feedback from the users. And if we go to the last slide, you will see that we are concluding this brief introduction with a word cloud that highlights the key concepts that are guiding our next steps. You can see that collaboration and synergies are very central to our work, and because of that, we are also very much looking forward to hearing from our panelists today and learning from their experiences and exploring new areas of collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Ivana, for presenting this work. It's a big work, big collaborative effort of all of us. Please, in the end of this webinar, we'll share the link with you to read this document. It's on our website, and I encourage you to join our community and to keep on contributing to this framework. And use this framework. So as we value all your contributions, we invited several speakers here to share what their opinions are on a framework and on working with and developing education frameworks. So let's move to our panel discussion and explore how this work connects to these wider education frameworks on sustainability, green competences, and so on. And I will let the panelists present the perspectives from policy research or international collaboration, and see how we can continue with this framework. You can all see here the speakers that are with us today. I will let the speakers introduce themselves. When we start, we have here with us Ms. Sophia Queckenberg. Yes, I will say your name, and then you can quickly introduce yourself, and then we continue to the panel.
Perfect.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. And as Evie was already saying, I'm Sophia, and I work at the European Commission at the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture. And there specifically, I work within the schools unit, and there we work within the green education team. So we really work on integrating sustainability into education and training systems across Europe. And my experience mostly is with the Green Comp, so the European Sustainability Competence Framework. And that is also what I'll be drawing kind of my lessons and experience in the panel discussion from. So I think that's just good to know. And I'm very excited to also be discussing the importance of frameworks with the fellow panelists. So thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you, Sophia. Mr. Tremeur Denigot.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be with you today. I want to warmly thank you, Evie, for the invitation. So I'm Tremeur Denigot. As you can hear, I'm French. I'm a French education expert, and I just led the European Commission, where I helped design and develop, implement the Education for Climate Coalition at the Joint Research Center at the European Commission, together with my dear colleagues, Sophia, among others, at the Education Department of the European Commission. I've been living in various countries. I'm currently living in Italy, and I'm also Breton, so coming from Brittany. And I grew up in a city near the Atlantic Ocean. So blue education is very, very dear to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Tremeur. Miss Katerina Annaiadou.
Hello, good morning, everybody. So yes, I'm Katerina. Thank you it's for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to participate in this panel on this new framework. So I'm based at UNESCO headquarters, based more specifically in the section for Education for Sustainable Development. And more specifically, I am currently coordinating the work of the Greening Education Partnership. I'll just say just one word about the partnership for those who are not familiar. So this is an open partnership that was launched back in 2022 that comprises both member states and other stakeholders working towards achieving sustainability, but and specifically climate change education. We have 97 member states that have joined and thousands of other stakeholders. And we're also working in order to help us support members to achieve their objectives in climate education, we have also made available several tools and frameworks, if you like, and I will be hopefully speaking about some of those in the next few minutes in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. And then Miss Cassie Hague.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and a really big congratulations to everyone involved in the development of the Blue Education Framework. I work at the OECD at the Centre for Educational Research and Innovation here, and we're based in Paris. And I work mainly on the projects around supporting educators and education systems to develop creativity and critical thinking. So we think the Blue Education Framework's approach of supporting ocean and freshwater literacy, whilst recognizing that that involves kind of creative and critical application of subject knowledge, the ability to navigate with uncertainty, to navigate complex issues, to take different perspectives and explore different ways of approaching those complex issues, is really important. And we've worked on those kinds of issues with educators and education systems. And so that's the sort of experience that I'll be drawing on today in the panel discussion. So yeah, thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie. Maybe I can invite you to start, if you like. What has your perspective been on what does a framework, how does it start to deliver change in education? Can you share your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think clearly one of the most sort of valuable aspects of a framework is that it offers a shared sense of direction, and that's certainly been our experience. So helping people understand sort of, excuse me, what they're working towards, what the kind of key considerations are, where the main challenges and opportunities might lie. And I think it's that shared understanding really that makes it much easier for people to coordinate their efforts. And a really important aspect of that is local ownership. So I think it's a framework's most useful in our experience when it's not seen as kind of imposed from above, but something that's a tool for people to interpret and adapt to their own circumstances. And I think one of the real strengths of the Blue Education Framework is that self-assessment piece that does encourage kind of self-reflection. So it's giving schools and educators and local authorities kind of space to consider what those ideas mean in their own context, rather than kind of prescribing a single way of doing Blue education. And that's certainly been something that we've found in our work on integrating creativity and critical thinking into professional learning frameworks, is that combination is really important. So the kind of shared common vision helps create coherence, but the kind of real change starts to happen when teachers and students and school leaders shape those ideas for themselves. So I think finding that balance between a shared direction and local agency is often where frameworks can really start to change things.
Miss Sophia Queckenberg, do you have also that experience?
Yeah, sorry, I'm also my voice a little bit. Yeah, Cassie, thank you very much already. I think I very much relate to what you're saying. And before this panel, I was also kind of reflecting, what do I actually understand? What even is a framework to me? And I think I came up with like certain elements that kind of make up a framework, which, first in very broad sense, it was this kind of structured guidance. So there's structure somewhere there, that it allows for shared expectations. I think you also said like a common vision, a common direction. So it's a shared language, it's shared expectations. And that also allows for comparability. And I think that's something we also often see. It gives you kind of a reference point. It allows you to compare, and especially at the EU level, at the international level, that's often important as well if we talk about portability of competences across different countries, across very different education systems, recognizing qualification. So we also, that's a very strong point of any kind of framework. So yeah, we have this structure, shared language, shared expectations, and comparability. And if we look specifically at Green Comp, so this is the European Sustainability Competence Framework, it's a competence framework. I think that's also important to point out. So we look really at the competences that learners need to kind of act with empathy and care for people and the planet. And we have 4 different competence areas. So we look at embodying sustainability values, we look at navigating complexity, at envisioning sustainable futures, and acting for sustainability. So, and then we, in each of those, we have another set of 3 competences and also, very detailed kind of proficiency levels that you can achieve. So you already see there's a lot of structure there, and that structure and that coherence kind of helps to shape, what are the learning outcomes. It helps to support kind of curriculum design, training design. So I think all of that is very important. So you have that structure on one hand, but then as Cassie already was saying, we need the local agency and we need the kind of local adaptation and contextualization. I think that is actually what makes a lot of frameworks effective. And I always there was a workshop I gave a while back, and a participant, they called it, the Green Comp specifically, the framework, a compass. And I think this kind of idea of a compass is really nice. It kind of guides you in a certain way, but it also, allows you to kind of maybe sometimes steer away a little bit and, see at your local needs, your local context, and see how can you adapt it there. And that's also what we see in practice very much. And I think some examples there is nice. We see, Green Comp kind of inspiring other frameworks. So we see it, for example, with the France, they have their own national sustainability competence framework, and Green Comp really inspired that. We see it also now with the PISA climate literacy scale. We also see Green Comp mentioned there, but we also have, more grassroots, bottom up. We see a lot of Erasmus, a lot of Horizon projects, and there you also see that they have their unique audience, their unique needs. For example, now for you, it's also Blue Education specifically, but we also have, people working with, youth workers, or we have, early childhood education and care, and there you need to adapt that competence framework. You need to take it down and see, it's not the same for, adult learners versus early childhood education and care. That's a very different, target audience, let's say. It's very different people you need to engage with. So again, I see the structure, the coherence, the shared language, but also, local agency and adaptation. Very much aligned.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I like the idea of the compass.
Yeah.
That guides us and inspires us. Tremeur, you have interviewed quite a lot of people working with frameworks. What is your experience?
Yeah, I met a lot of people, as a matter of fact. But I very much appreciate the compass picture, which is exactly what I wanted to say. It's a blue compass to my view, what you've done. And we need this compass because the ocean is very vast. But let me start by congratulating you for that wonderful really framework. I think it's really good. And I also wanted to congratulate you for the method you have, which is having a very intensive collaboration across the consortium. And collaboration is really the key, but I will come back to that later on. And also that you proceed by iteration. That's very important. It's an iterative process. That's exactly what we try to do also with Education for Climate Coalition. In fact, you treat, and we need to treat all the frameworks, to my view, as living documents that integrate the lessons learned, and that we come from real project activities, and we avoid a bit the common pitfall, of creating a top-down policy, as Cassie was saying, which is supposed magically to fall into the classroom, when in fact often it fails in the classroom tragically. So I think that's very important, and I appreciate very much that method that you have. So I don't want to repeat what Sophia and Cassie said, because frameworks, as a matter of fact, are common languages. They are missing also. They are bridging between the concepts and the theories with the concrete and scalable implementation in the classroom. So we need frameworks to make it short. but they do not guarantee transformative change per se. I think we got to be very clear on that also. They provide a methodology, they are a roadmap, a compass, as you said, Sophia, to make such a change possible. So it's a very, very important start. They are necessary, but they are not sufficient. And we've got to be very clear about that. They will deliver transformative change when and only if they move from being a PDF in the locker of a ministry or in ministry website to a tool for concrete improvement and implementation in the classroom. And the question is how that this happened. And that's not that easy, of course. But you will ask us questions later on, and I will try to give an answer. But to make it short, I think obviously we need political will. Obviously we need resources. But most importantly, to my view, especially at that moment, we need capacity building to make sure that it's not just, to add a topic, it's an add-on, and that we really focus on the building aspect, of that equation, which is a complex one. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Tremeur. Indeed, we are providing the building blocks, but somebody has to build it. We all have to build it together. Katerina, can you share your experience?
Yes, thank you. I fully agree, obviously, with what my colleague said just now about, framework is a tool, right? It's a shared reference point that gives a shared direction and so on, and of its own, as we heard, it's not going to solve all the problems, and it's only as good as what you put into it in order to have outcomes. I mean, maybe what I can share is just a couple of examples of shared frameworks or guiding tools that we have produced in the context of the Greening Education Partnership, because this is a global partnership, and we, our end users and beneficiaries are individuals and stakeholders and institutions in very, very different contexts all over the globe. And so I think without having shared tools, it would be very, very challenging, even impossible to be able for us, for example, both to support them in achieving their objectives, but also for us to be able to have a sense of to what extent we are moving in the right direction and to what extent we're having an impact. So the two tools that the partnership has produced and has been using to support its work have been the Green School Quality Standard, which gives a framework for schools to follow if they want to become green, if they want to improve their action in this sense. And it gives, I think what's interesting is that, as we heard, I think from one of the colleagues, I think Cassie maybe mentioned it, that this element of, for a framework to be global and to work, it has to be both obviously concrete enough to be meaningful, but at the same time it has to be broad enough and flexible enough to be able to be adaptable in different situations, and for people to be able to adapt it to their own context. So I think that's one of the interesting aspects of the Green School Standard, is that, for example, it provides, in addition to providing a very comprehensive set of actions that schools can undertake. We also try to give indications, for example, on the amount of resources that need to be put into each of those actions. And so, of course, different schools, different institutions in different global contexts have different resources, amongst other things, available to them. So it's an example of how you can make a framework more meaningful to its actual beneficiaries, so that it's not, again, as we heard, something that just stays as a PDF file, as a nice publication that's produced by by a sort of global organization. So that's one, and then maybe later on I can also speak more about that. We also have the Green Curriculum Guidance, which again is a reference. It's not a curriculum itself. Of course, countries have the authority to develop their own curricula for their own schools, but it's a guidance on how to include green and climate change concepts in national or regional curricula.
Now you have presented these two frameworks. I can continue with you, Katerina, as we. So, do you see any comparison between these frameworks and Blue Education framework?
Well, definitely, I think so. I mean, I think what's interesting about the Blue Education framework, I mean, and it's interesting also to read about this because it's discussed in the document, in the report itself, the sort of relationship between blue and green education. So I think what we mean by green education, green is a term that we use as a sort of I don't know, a communication term for education, for climate change and sustainability more broadly. I think frameworks on the whole, they can operate at different levels, both at different levels, but also thematically. So I think what's obviously even the green frameworks that we have developed in the Green Education Partnership, they come under a much broader framework, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, for that are much broader, both also thematically, and also the education, the ESD for 2030 framework, Education for Sustainable Development 2030 framework, that's guiding UNESCO's and our member states' work on sustainability and education for sustainability more broadly. And obviously, I think the Blue Education, I found it particularly interesting because I think it's building on all these pre-existing frameworks. It has obviously a very specific thematic focus on being the blue, the ocean literacy, and so on. But I find it I thought it was very well done because it takes also this very holistic approach of looking at the issues related to ocean literacy, not just from a very let's say narrow angle of just looking at it from the point of view of scientific literacy, for example, but having this broader perspective of bringing up also including the more social and economic issues and dimensions, and that's something that both in the Green Curriculum Guidance and our JEP approach, but also the ESD approach of UNESCO is something that's very, very strong, that it's very broad. ESD, it's not just about environmental education in a very narrow sense, but it's about learning to live sustainably in a very broad way, including issues that have to do with inclusion and equality and so on. So I'll stop there.
Yes, thank you, Katerina. Sophia, do you want to respond on that?
Yes, thank you, Katerina, as well. So also thinking about some of the similarities, for me, I think this was mentioned a few times already as well. What's really important is this kind of co-creation process. So really the methodology, how frameworks are created. And I think Tremeur also mentioned it's an iterative process. So it's something, that you come together again and you improve and you test it and you see how it develops. And I can really see that in the Blue Education Framework methodology as well. And you brought a lot of different stakeholders together, from researchers, from teachers, from also, different policymakers, from NGOs. So you have this kind of co-creation. And I think this is so important for any type of framework, that it brings together, this group of people. And I think on that we can build, and that also allows it to maybe be applied in different settings, even though it still needs adaptation, but it kind of allows this shared common vision to develop. And some other things I was thinking about just in terms of similarities, but also maybe just what I find very unique. Also, congratulations. I also want to say that on this, on the launch of the framework for you. And what I really like about it when I was reading through it was that you include both the freshwater and the ocean and marine kind of, literacy. So it's not, I think a lot of the times we see more about, marine or ocean literacy being talked about, but also kind of taking into the freshwater perspective. So also showing that this is, something that actually applies everywhere. So it's not just about coastal communities, but actually we extend beyond that. It's not just schools, at the coast, but we want to see this more systemically, more holistically across Europe. And I think also the systemic, very holistic approach. This is maybe a bit of a difference in some ways also to more of the Green Comp framework, because there we look a bit more at the individual level, a bit more at the learner competence level. While I think your frameworks, it looks a bit more on the systemic level. It's like really about like, okay, what needs to change? What are the kind of sectors that we need to look at? And what are the bigger stakeholder groups that we need to look at? So I think that is very important to kind of be looking at both the systemic, but also maybe a bit at the individual level as well sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Sophia, for bringing that up. Yeah, for us, of course, all water is connected. So it makes perfectly sense also to involve all schools from inland to look at the water there. Tremeur.
Yeah, we'll add
your
things to
perspective.
I will jump on what Sophia was saying, because obviously I see a very obvious and strong conceptual bond between Green Comp, of course, and your framework, which is very good. But the blue framework is adding some sort of value in providing a blue thread, I should say, and which is a concrete and relatable, context, which is water, and it adds that to sometimes a bit broader, for sure, as Katerina is saying, but also abstract sustainability goals sometimes. So the question is, could there be a risk of, how could I say, fragmentation in a way, a framework fatigue for teachers? It's also a possibility. I'm good to keep that in mind, of course. But to answer very bluntly your question, I don't think it's happening with your framework at all. There's no overlap, for instance, with Green Comp. There's a clear complementarity. Because, and that's what I appreciate the most in that framework, is that it can help the achieving Green Comp in a way goals through a blue lens. Because as a matter of fact, as Katerina is saying, green is blue at the end of the day. So unlike Green Comp, which focuses, as you know, on defining what a person should know and value, which are competencies, I see the blue education framework much more as focusing on the how, the process. And I like that very much. How a system can concretely transition from theory to practice. So Green Comp is defining the 12 competencies needed for the green transition, when your framework is much more operational in a way, defines the systemic conditions that are required to deliver those competencies through the specific lens, of course, of water. So I think it's what you're explaining in your report, and there's a room, of course, for interoperability and on complementarity between these frameworks. I've got no doubt about that. There's one lesson in fact that I've learned when I was working and developing the Education for Climate Coalition across the European education area with the JRC and the Education Department of the European Commission, is that often the primary reason educational initiatives fail is more for a lack of structural pathways, the how, than a lack of vision, the what. In fact, we are not very good sometimes at implementing things because we are lacking capacities or capabilities. But I will come back to that later on, because it's my point on the building capacity, but we definitely need to focus on that, to my view.
Yeah, thank you, Tremeur. I'm happy to hear this. Indeed, it was also our goal to make it as operational as possible. First, to start with, as we are testing it in 9 countries, so it had to be operational, so they can use it. Our partners can actually work with this. And we gathered a lot of case studies from everywhere on how it has been done so far to share that experience. Maybe Cassie, can you also share your experience?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Excuse me. I won't talk too much because I kind of agree with everything that colleagues have said. Of course, there is a risk of kind of the proliferation of frameworks and that kind of causing confusion, but I absolutely don't think that's the case here. I think when frameworks have kind of clear purposes, that helps to kind of draw them apart from each other, even whilst they also align with the concerns of other frameworks. If I think of some of the frameworks that we have at the OECD, it was mentioned the kind of PISA 2029 climate literacy framework, which is looking at kind of assessment, but more focusing on my own work on kind of creativity and critical thinking. We have kind of frameworks and models and conceptual rubrics around creativity and critical thinking that are kind of built around 4 different subdimensions. So inquiring, imagining, doing, and reflecting. And they look at what students might be concretely doing in the classroom when they're kind of developing their creativity and critical thinking. And they're kind of built to be adaptable to any kind of topic across the curriculum. And so there's clearly a lot of complementarity there. The OECD also does a lot of work on kind of well-being and social emotional skills and measuring social and emotional skills. And so I really appreciate the kind of Blue Education's frameworks focus on the kind of emotional dimension of learning about ocean and freshwater literacy. It's kind of recognition that young people will experience those sorts of issues in different ways across Europe and beyond. And it's important that educational approaches kind of recognize that diversity. So yeah, I absolutely see these frameworks and the Blue Education framework as reinforcing one another, connecting to the same priorities, but with different purposes. So kind of all contributing to that common aim of helping young people develop the knowledge and skills that they need to navigate, our current world in a slightly uncertain future, or more than slightly uncertain.
Yes, indeed. We can move now, Tremeur, to maybe what you wanted to say on what is actually needed to put this into practice, a framework like ours.
Yeah, it's really coming out of my experience with the coalition, but it goes beyond. I will explain why. So as I said before, I see your framework as an implementation framework, which focuses on actors of change and the incentives for their engagement so that change happen in the end. I very much appreciate the fact that it prioritizes also evaluation and monitoring, which is absolutely key. It's crucial. If we want implementation to occur concretely, we need also to be able to assess what we're doing. We don't do that too often, to my view. It tries in a way to fill the gap between, but it usually prevents transformative change from actually reaching the student. So if we have transformative change, as we call it in mind, to my view, that realization depends on a systemic adoption, which means that we need to foster cross-sector collaboration, or multi-stakeholders, as the UNESCO puts it rightly. But education transformation, to my view, won't happen without such an approach. So that requires really a very articulated collaboration between the main actors of change. So if we start from there, then we understand how capacity building is crucial. And that's the question we ask ourselves when we created the Education for Climate Coalition, is how can we foster such a transversal collaboration between all actors, from practitioners to policy people, and make sure that they commit to deliver change. So it's a complex question, and the answer is even more complex, of course. So when I was saying before that we need, systemic leverages to implement change, obviously it's about political will, that's for sure, if we want to come from vision to mandate. And we need to embed, for instance, your framework into curricula, and national strategies and things like that. That's obvious. We need a whole school approach and a whole institution approach. And on this, UNESCO is now repeating the same thing for decades. I'm not sure everyone is listening, but because they are right. Second thing, of course, is resources. So funding your blue reality, if you want. That's obvious. So that we ensure the right resource allocation in order to have the blue challenges, let's say, implemented. But, and that's my point, I think the last one is capacity building, to empower the actors of change and foster their capacities and competency. And I think we need to focus very much also on public sector in particular, public organization. Obviously, teachers are the most critical actors of change. They are the catalyst in a way. Maybe the students are more the agents. We cannot expect to deliver, we cannot expect them to deliver if they are not trained to teach, of course. But we got to move also from, the one-off webinars and that are being done on sustainability towards a proper continuous professional development that is recognized, that is integrated into teacher training systems. But, and that's my point, I think this has got to be fostered, but it has to be rooted in a community approach. And that's really something I've learned with the coalition, the Education for Climate Coalition. The teachers are most effective when they are not acting in isolation, but are part of a vibrant community of practice. And when the practitioners are able to meet the education stakeholders, the policy people, and that together at that point, they manage to install some sort of peer-to-peer learning, co-creating, of course, solutions together, exchanging use cases. You said that is absolutely crucial, and cross-border collaboration. And having in mind to develop a sort of culture of evidence-informed policies that are duly evaluated. And we need a conversation to happen to make that happen. So this is what we try to do with the coalition. So my recommendation to you is that you got a tool which is existing, which is the Education for Climate Coalition. The Commission is paying for it, so it's for free. And it has a cost, believe me. So use it because we need to have common spaces, common communities where all together we can share what we're doing and channel through our different solutions, be it a blue education framework or other frameworks that are going to come. So that's something I really strongly believe in, having very in mind to develop the capacities and the competences really of the actors. And as I said before, and I think I'm very glad to see the European Commission is, and the European Union is going towards that path at the moment with, for instance, the technical instrument that put it, TSI, we call it, which is helping really the member states on their public organization in particular, develop their capacities and their competences, and having that conversation happening at transnational level, bringing in the practitioners and the policy people together. Let's do this.
Yeah, thank you, Tremeur. That gives us something concrete to think about for our next steps. Sophia, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Tremeur, also for the advertisement also of the Education for Climate Coalition, and I can just follow up on that. And I think, capacity building is really key, and I also like this I think Katerina was also talking about it, about how we need to kind of get away from the theory and kind of put it into practice and really have this embodied practice and actually have a lot of different people engage with the framework and see how it works to learn from that. And I think there's a lot of learning. And I think you mentioned like it's a common space to come together, but I think it's also a common space to come together and learn from each other. And I think that is very important. So I see that as a key factor. But then I was also thinking a bit maybe back to what we were talking before about already, which for me is always something that really needs to be avoided when thinking about a framework, or for me it's some bit of a challenge or barrier. It's to make it into a checklist. And I think that can sometimes happen. And I think it's something that I don't necessarily see happening here in this case, but I think it's something that we really need to be careful about, because we need this fine balance, right, between structure and flexibility. I already talked about, because if we have too little structure, we become so vague that, a lot of different people cannot understand each other anymore. But if there's too much structure, we become very rigid and kind of, prescriptive almost. And I always like to talk about a bit of a personal anecdote there as well. So I went through the German kind of school system, and I don't know, maybe there's probably some people maybe also in the room who went through the German school system. And we used to have these things when we would write essays, they're called like expectation horizons. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it was like very specific list of everything that needs to be mentioned in our essays, and we would get a kind of check mark for everything we would have mentioned. And if we would instead, though, decide to, go into detail on one little thing and like go very high quality, very depth and very elaborative, we would actually maybe miss out on all the other things. We would actually get a very low mark because, we only went into one thing where we might have just been able to reach 5 points, but we missed out all the other things. So we actually were trained very much to you get a check for all the different small parts, and that really trained us, for breadth over depth. And it was so clear that we all were just trying to, get a little check for all the different analysis points. And it was just such an obvious example for me of how, some assessment framework where they tried to do it, well, really turned into this checklist. And it took away all kind of creativity, all kind of, uniqueness and way as well to kind of go into certain areas in more depth. And I don't know. So maybe some people of you can relate who also had these very specific assessment frameworks. So yes, also going maybe a little bit into that assessment in general, right? Also very tricky, very difficult. We see, you also looking into monitoring and assessment. In general, it's just something that is tricky in these spaces because a lot of these things cannot be quantified. There's no right or wrong, and it's so hard to do. And we do see new assessment methods emerging, and I also want to point towards that, and I think that is very interesting. We have, for example, in a Horizon project now, it's called Impact, working on assessment of action competence specifically, and they're looking into how do we assess this in a more effective way. So there's new, because of it is a challenge and it is a struggle, you also see new ideas and new methods and different concepts emerging. And maybe I think Cassie probably has something to say about that as well, I feel like.
Cassie, yeah, please.
Yes, I mean, I think the points that you're making, Sophia, are really interesting and really important. And it's certainly something that we thought a lot about, both in terms of kind of large scale assessments, but also on the creativity and critical thinking project, thinking carefully about how you can, for example, assess creativity without constraining creativity. And so I think all that to say, kind of course, the assessment piece, both of kind of student development and the development of skills and knowledge around blue education is really important, and as others have said, kind of the monitoring and evaluation of the broader kind of programs is also really important ingredients to support implementation. I also wanted to kind of pick out a few other issues. I mean, my colleagues have already really well articulated many of the needed ingredients for implementation, which I completely agree with, particularly around the sort of need for a community approach and communities of practice. I think it's also really important that in order to kind of get implementation on the ground in classrooms, that Blue Education is able to kind of connect with existing priorities in classrooms, whether that be making education more engaging for students, actually delivering the curriculum, so linking with the kind of science knowledge that's in the curriculum, or developing kind of cognitive and social and emotional skills. I think that's really important to make sure that teachers are able to implement these things in the classroom, so that they see that their Blue Education work is aligned with those concerns rather than distracting from it in any way. And I think concrete examples is a really important part of that. So something we do on the Creativity and Critical Thinking project is work with networks of schools across 24 different countries to develop a bank of pedagogical resources. So we have, for example, lesson plans that kind of draw on Blue Education, and we'd love to have more of those and to share them with you. And so we have one, for example, on ocean acidification, which kind of starts from a teaching and learning goal around kind of understanding how chemical reactions can change pH levels, and then kind of goes on to look at the sort of models of ocean change, changing levels of carbon dioxide, and get students to kind of think about modeling, think about the uncertainty and assumptions associated with models, creating their own models, etc. So that, is just one example that kind of gives teachers a practical way, and indeed decision makers as well, a practical way of seeing how they might be able to do Blue Education in a way that also connects with the curriculum and other kind of aspects of education that they're tasked with. And then I just wanted to talk also about kind of professional learning and the importance of the community approach, as colleagues have said. One of the things that we're doing is working in 6 different countries to localize a global kind of professional learning framework for creativity and critical thinking. And again, there we see such value in kind of supporting communities of practice, and teachers kind of talking to each other, and indeed school leaders talking to each other about how this can work in their context, and then kind of reaching out to colleagues so that it really is connecting to the needs of the learners, and the sort of teaching traditions, and the sort of circumstances that they experience. So I think all of those things are really important for implementation, alongside some careful thinking about assessment and evaluation and monitoring.
Yeah, thank you, Cassie, and also for suggesting to link it to the lesson plans. Same for you, Sophia. Thank you for introducing us this initiative on assessments, as we are assessing schools to provide them with funding to implement the project. These tools will surely be helpful for us later on. Katerina, how do you think the framework can reach the right audience from your experience, maybe from a global experience?
Yes, well, thank you. I mean, not very much to add, I think, to what colleagues have already said. I think it is very, just to pick up on a couple of points that seem very, very important to me as well, that to ensure that that there isn't this sort of framework fatigue, if you like, or that, stakeholders, and especially teachers also, because as we all know, the key in implementing any kind of education framework, whether blue or green or anything else. But what we also know is that often they may feel that they are being told to do more. So there is, of course, the issue of capacities and making sure that they have the right, that they have the skills and the capacities to be able to implement. But beyond that, I think before we do that, I think it's very important to ensure that for us, when we are, or for whoever is designing frameworks and implementing frameworks, to make it as clear as possible that how these different frameworks complement each other, how they are aligned to each other, in order not for them to appear, as it is the case here, for example, in order for them not to appear as if it's yet another extra element that teachers or other stakeholders are asked to deal with and to implement. So it's important to, and I think it goes back to what we're discussing at the very beginning about the quality of the frameworks. What are frameworks for? How can they be complementary to each other? How can they be designed in such a way that from the very beginning, their value, their added value, is obvious and it's obvious to all the stakeholders that in the broader community. It's not just something that's been imposed in a sort of top-down way. So that's one very important aspect, I think. And then, of course, the capacity development, I think, again, the point has been made. And having global communities, I think this is a good example of even also now beginning to do that. So sharing the frameworks with the global community, having open spaces for discussion, having spaces for sharing experiences, sharing examples, bringing people together so that they do not feel they're operating completely on their own, but they can have a network and a community where they can discuss and they can learn from. I think that's very important, and I think that's it's also the raison d'être, the reason that the partnerships and coalitions such as the Green Education Partnership and other coalitions exist. I think it's to provide this platform for stakeholders to communicate and to share and to exchange.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much, Katerina. I guess it's up to us to connect the frameworks to each other. Sophia, what potential collaborations do you see from your side?
Yeah, I think so I think I already mentioned this a bit before as well. I feel like your framework is you're already mentioning it, right? The holistic approach is a very systems level. And we often look more at the competence level, so it's a bit of a lower, more individual level. But we've also looked at how these competences are, for example, integrated in European school curricula, especially looking at how is sustainability integrated in curricula. And one thing we noticed there, for example, one of the competences that we saw least reflected was future literacy. Which I think is a really important competence, envisioning futures, envisioning alternative futures. And that is something we just didn't see reflected across different levels of education. And I think I would be very curious and to pose this question as well in terms of how is that in Blue education? Is this maybe different? Is this maybe even more reflected? Is maybe Blue education a good example of how we can envision alternative futures? Do they have this, more strongly reflected? And in general, it would be interesting to, also look at the different competences. Also, I think systems thinking and complexity, super important when we think about also the ocean. There's so much left to explore. There's so many, complexities, uncertainties integrated there that really we need a lot of, to navigate that as well. So I see it's a lot of strong connections, and it would be just interesting to see what competences you find when you look at the Blue education integration, and which you find more strongly, which you maybe see less reflected, and maybe a different maturity level, because I know you also look at the different maturity levels of kind of integration of Blue education in different countries and different education ecosystems. And what do we see more? What's a more baseline one? What's a really higher level? Maybe you also find that future literacy is really not so much reflected. So I see a lot of possibilities for collaboration there now.
Yes, thank you for sharing this. Tremeur.
I would like to jump on what Katerina was saying, because to my view it's absolutely crucial. We have a lot to do ourselves, policy people. If I insist so much on the community approach, is that to my view, a community should be seen as a sort of policy incubator, meaning that when we develop new policies or new tools, public policies on public tools, we should upfront make sure that we collaborate together very closely. That's the best way to develop policies that are sustainable policies that are sustainable, if you want. Because we can beta test in a way in our communities, compare what we're doing together, make sure that from the very beginning what we're doing is fully linked to what's happening really on the ground. And for that, you need that community approach. And then we avoid the the multiplication of tools sometimes that are even that create the fatigue we're referring to, Katerina, and things like that. So it's also about very much the member states together, but also the organization, internal organization working together upfront. And we got to have that sort of approach systematically embedded in our public policies processes, to my view, really. Then I will just add something to Sophia was stressing the importance of action competences. It's a totally different subject, but it's absolutely crucial, and that's something we've learned. As a matter of fact, Sophia, all competences are important, of course, when it comes to sustainable education, but action competences are something that appears to be really key. And the Impact Horizon project she was referring to is a very interesting project for focusing on that, and I think it's a very good thing. And we've got to come up on that. That's what they will do, by the way, to invent new ways of assessing action competences, because it's not easy at all. And teachers, educators need to be able to assess, of course, the competences.
Yeah, that's a concrete way of how we can continue to work together. Katerina, would you like to respond?
Yes, I mean, well, first of all, I think we just one good example that we have already initiated this work, as I said at the very beginning, that we have this process of aligning schools around the world to our green school standard, and within that we have now we're in contact with colleagues who work in the Blue School Network, the Global Blue School Network, and we're seeing how we can align the blue schools to our green school standard. So that's already, I think, one very concrete example of a collaboration that we are undertaking. But I think we can explore also other ways where we can see how the framework, the blue school, the blue framework can be introduced. Maybe we can have some pilot countries that are particularly interested. I mean, the Greening Education Partnership is a very open and very global community. So I think there's potentially a lot of entry points where we can have occasions where we can implement, or we can try out ideas from the Blue framework and how we can implement them within the partnership. But yes, the blue and the green schools, bringing them together. I know it sounds, I don't know if you mix green and blue, what sort of color you will get, but yeah, but I think that's one very obvious entry point for collaboration.
Yeah, thank you for suggesting that. We'll surely follow up on that. They have a lot in common, and yeah, blue schools are our testing grounds as well.
Yeah, I mean green beyond the joke about the colors, yeah, but green we just mean schools that are interested in issues on sustainability, whether it's with biodiversity, climate change, climate justice. Yeah, it's very broad. So of course, anything to do about water and oceans and so on is included in these concepts.
Yeah. If I could wear my hat of the blue schools for a moment, if you look at the schools that apply, they have other certificates of being an eco school or working on climate. So they all work on these topics. So, yeah. Cassie, what potential collaborations do you see?
Yeah, so obviously, I think one kind of potential area of collaboration is just sort of bringing these different sort of drivers together. And so I sort of mentioned producing or sharing kind of practical examples, but I'm sort of thinking for those that kind of want to develop creativity and critical thinking, if we could provide examples that show how they could do that through developing kind of blue education initiatives, and for those that want to develop blue education initiatives, if we could help to show how they might also be developing creativity and critical thinking through these kind of practical examples. I think that's a kind of practical way that the kind of creativity and critical thinking work at the OECD could collaborate with you, as well, of course, more broadly within our work on climate literacy and green education, just making sure that there is elements of ocean and freshwater literacy within that, so that blue education is kind of squarely within those sorts of policy considerations and practical implementation considerations. So yeah, lots of room for collaboration, both in terms of learning from each other about supporting systems to integrate educational frameworks, but also on the more kind of practical element of sharing practical resources, I think.
Thank you, Cassie. I think, yeah, it's important for us to keep having this common space and keep on talking to each other after this webinar. Thank you very much to all speakers here. Some questions have been raised in the Q&A. Michaela, do you want to share those questions?
Sure. I see that a lot of questions have already been answered, but we still have some. So the first question is to Sophia to answer, in her opinion, how can green comp or other sustainability values can be used in blue education?
Yeah, I think I've already talked and touched up on this a little bit also in my just my previous answer, but I think, like we've all been saying now, right? I think there's no clear distinction between green education and blue education. I think anytime we talk about sustainability education, blue education is a core component and a core part of this. And I think also when developing green comp, I think it's also a choice of word, right? There were a lot of different words to kind of choose one, and there was, a lot of discussion on why do we call it green comp, right? We could have called it something else as well in the end. And I think the green just came in, I don't even remember why at this point, but so I wouldn't see it as so distinct, only for green education. But I think a lot of the competences are very applicable for blue education. Like if we think of what values, right? There's also about valuing, nature, which, water, everything falls under that as well. We look at valuing fairness, for example. There's a lot about inequity. There's a lot about access. So I think that is important, but also very much complexity. I think I already talking about this, systems thinking, it's a very complex systems when we're looking at oceans. We can learn a lot in the future visioning, future literacy, alternative futures, what could these look like? I think there's a lot of good work already done in the blue education space there. I've seen that as well. And even just, with fishing, I know that there's a lot of, what could this alternatively look like? And also then one of the most important one is Tremeur was also mentioning the action competence. So the collective action, I think, is one of the key ones here. And I think that is also just as applicable in the blue education space, and cooperation, kind of working together. So I see just a lot of overlap. I don't think it's distinct. And I think I also saw somewhere in the chat a question why it would be Europe specific. I think it might have already been answer, but also just wanting to point that out again. It is not Europe specific. So Green Cop is not just made, for a European context. It's really meant to, be broad, be quite holistic and not be so context specific, so that it can actually be adapted to unique context. Afterwards, it's really meant, for kind of all learners. We try to keep it relatively abstract, and also for non-formal, for formal settings. So really trying to be broad on purpose so that it can be adapted. So you can, of course, also use it outside of Europe. We'll be very happy to see that, and we already see that happening.
Great, thank you, Sophia. The next question is how the framework and this kind of initiatives could enforce education systems to include Blue in their curricula. This is not addressed to anyone in particular, but if someone wants to take this one.
Sure, if I may. So just to share our opinion on this. So basically, how we see it is that the idea of the framework is not really to enforce any changes directly, but mainly to create the conditions, to see what are the feasible actions, to empower the learners, the actors, and to equip them with knowledge. And from there, by showing what is actually the value of Blue, we link it to the existing learning goals and the overall structure. So not per se enforcing, but more of enabling. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ivana.
If there is no one else to speak on this question, we can proceed to the next one. One of the participants mentions that they are scientific coordinator of a marine education center in Morocco, which will open very soon, and that they would be honored to collaborate with you and learn from your experience and adapt the Blue education framework to the local context. So could you please advise on how you could proceed or you could get involved, how the participant could get involved with you, and how you can collaborate on this matter?
Maybe I should take this one. So we have a community of practice where we can share, where we can communicate with each other and share our experiences. Of course, you're very happy. We invite you to contact us also directly, contact the coordinator or our info address, and then we can see how we can bring that framework to Morocco. Yeah.
Okay, and there is the last one, which is quite long, but I will read it out fully. So one of the participants is very interested to learn how educational activities developed within different projects can be better coordinated. And there is a question if there is a framework within the European Blue Education Framework that actively supports synergies between projects developing high quality education tools. And as an example, there is Horizon Europe Restore for Life project that was recently developed. It recently developed an innovative educational tool that explains the complex functions of rivers and floodplains in a creative and interactive way. And the question is, how could such a tool be integrated into a broader framework that supports capacity building, upscaling, and long-term adoption? I know the question is quite complicated, but if anyone would like to share their opinion on that.
Well, we have been, Michaela, as well, we have been looking at other projects that have been funded by the European Commission under Mission Ocean to see how we can collaborate, how we can integrate maybe resources, activities, anything, other frameworks, if there exists one, in our work. And we are very happy to share your work through our community of practice. So do please reach out to us and see how we can collaborate. Tremeur, you would like to...
Very quick observation, because I've witnessed during the last years how much education, and that's a very interesting question because it's another proof of that, is becoming something that a lot of researchers and policy people who are working on sustainability, not education, have in mind. And that's what we've seen with the missions, for instance, in Europe, is that now they begin every time when they're doing something, a mission on soil or whatever, to say, "On what about education?" And that's very good, to tell the truth. So I'm very happy. But it's true, to go back to the question, so that as there are a lot of people now, at last, I should say, beginning to understand the value and the key role played by education when it comes to implementing any sort of sustainable policies, we need more coordination. That's also true. And we go back to the issues of capacity building, because even us and even the European Commission, we need capacities to build the capacities. So yes, more coordination would be certainly absolutely welcome.
Yes, and you might have seen Michele's message that if you have any collaboration questions, if you want to do something together, you can always contact us at the email that we have just provided in the chat. So yeah, feel free to do so.
I believe we don't have any other questions. Let me check once again. Yeah, well, we came to the end of the webinar. Actually, we're a bit over time, so we can wrap up here. I don't know if Evie and Ivana, you want to say some wrap up key points?
Ivana, you want to?
Thank you. Yeah, just from our end, just to thank you all for participating today. Thanks to all the speakers who really gave us amazing ideas. So we will take our time also to digest it and also to see how we can include segments or fractions of what we at least discussed today in our future work. And thank you to all the speakers. Excellent questions from your end as well. And thanks again for being part of this. Evie, I believe we also want to remind everyone just to, if you haven't, please subscribe to our Blue Education platform. And also do not forget to inscribe to register for the next webinars.
Oh, yes, please do go to our website and register here and keep updated on the framework. And I really encourage you to have a look at the framework and help us review it. And as Tremeur said, it is a living document. To make the document alive more, so we are organizing a series of webinars. These are the first webinars for the next half year, diving deeper into several of the thematics of the framework, where we will invite speakers with and share their expertise from the different countries we have been working with so far. So national strategies, we have a webinar on curriculum, educational resources, and professional development. So this is coming up. Please do join us on these webinars. The QR code here is to access the framework directly, so you can have a look already. It's a long document, but in these webinars we will go step by step and highlight the most important things from the framework. So I think we have come to the end of this webinar. I thank you all. I thank all the speakers of today. It has been most interesting. And yeah, we look very much forward to keep on collaborating with you in different ways. And we will process everything that has been shared here. And yeah, thank you all for joining and making the time to be with us and taking this journey with us together as well. Thank you. And have a good day.
Bye-bye, everyone.